World Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at Louisiana State University. My specialty is Arabic literature, but most of my research is on Jews and Muslims in Yemen. Today I'm going to talk about a novel, a bit of a change of pace. The Yemeni fiction writer Ahmed Zain wrote two novels where the port city of Aden plays as great a role as any of the protagonists. These are Steamer Point from 2014 and A Piece of Fruit for the Crows, Fakih al-Ghurban from 2021. Zain's prose style, already developed in three novels prior to these Aden novels, is densely descriptive, meditative, and episodic. In it, descriptions of specific images, sounds, and smells are juxtaposed with dialogue between characters, long internal dialogues reflecting characters' psychological states and physical motion. Untitled chapters jump between different time periods. The Russian expert on modern Yemeni fiction, Mikhail Suvorov, notes that some Arab readers have criticized Zain's practice of juxtaposing anecdotes that switch from different time periods as being overly elusive and somewhat confusing. Against this, Suvorov argues that such juxtapositions help generate the novel's meanings, which are often quite original in Yemeni literature. Moreover, the writer seems to be keenly aware of the tradition of English travel writers offering word paintings of the sights and sounds of the busy port city. Steamer Point is a thought-provoking and finely wrought example of the Arabic post-colonial novel. Steamer Point interweaves the stories of two Yemeni men, Samir and Qasim. Samir, from the North Yemeni port town of Hodeidah, fled the civil war in the mid-60s, in which his father died as a combatant, between the Saudi-backed royalists and the Egyptian-backed Republicans. Aden, where Samir moves to live with his grandparents, immediately captivates him and becomes for him a noisy and fragrant, life-affirming contrast to Hodeidah, which is dead, silent, and stinks of fish. The Samir chapters, which make up the bulk of the novel, are all set in the 24 hours leading up to the British evacuation of Aden in 1967. Samir works as a servant in the opulent villa of an elderly man who is called, quote, the Frenchman. The Frenchman character is clearly modeled upon Antonin Bess, who died in 1951, the famously acerbic and shrewd merchant whose fortune endowed St. Anthony's College at the University of Oxford. The Yemeni and the European hardly speak to one another. Rather, they observe one another by means of a mirror in the villa and have extensive internal dialogues concerning their own lives and their relationships to one another and their thoughts about one another. It is revealed that the Frenchman hired Samir because of his work tutoring an older English woman called Iris in Arabic. The Frenchman and Iris, in turn, had had a love affair in the past, and he wanted to use Samir to spy on her. While Samir's Arabic student Iris worked in Aden's British administration, she had long before become disillusioned with the concept of the British Empire before she met Samir. The novel takes pains to emphasize the Frenchman's Frenchness, thereby pointing to his alienation from the majority of the British elite. In this, he shares similarities with other non-British elites, the Zoroastrian Khawasji Shah, the Jewish Mesa family, and a host of Hindu, Jain, and Muslim Indians, Persians, Greeks, and Lebanese. The Frenchman's intermediate status also helps explain his role in mediating between the British authorities and Aden's Jewish community before and after the riots in December 1937. Samir is an enthusiastic Anglophile, a fact that alienates him from the woman he loves, Suad, who ultimately chooses over him his rival, a nationalist rebel named Najib. Suad is the educated and feminist daughter of an oil refinery worker. Qasim's story, on the other hand, interwoven with Samir's, which is set in 1967, is set during and after the Second World War. Qasim is a smuggler originally from Hadramaut. His operations in Aden are abetted by a high-ranking British officer. Qasim falls in love with a prostitute, she's never named in the story, who he originally procures for the officer. When the officer is transferred, she disappears, and the tragic Qasim character becomes a teacher, a low-level government functionary, and later the owner of a working-class coffee house, all the while searching in vain for this woman. Aden's Jewish community, and more obliquely the Shoah, Zionism, and the creation of the State of Israel play a recurring role in each of the interwoven narratives. On a fairly superficial level, the sights, sounds, and smells of Aden's Jewish neighborhood and its opulent Magen Avraham synagogue contribute to the novel's attempt at conjuring up Aden's unique Arabian multicultural environment in the same way that its depictions of various characters who are Indian, Somali, or other, from other ethnicities do. In the 1967 Aden of Ahmed Zain's novel, Samir's grandmother tells him that in the past, and this is a quote from the novel, Pesach, and this is written out phonetically in Arabic, the celebration of their freedom from slavery and leaving Egypt in the company of the prophet Moses, did not pass by without the exchange of gifts with her, this is the Muslim grandmother's Jewish neighbors, and during the festival of Sukkot, a number of Arabs gave them etrogs and lulavim. Lulavim is also spelled out phonetically. Fruits blessed by the Torah and the knowledge that things would always get worse. Quote, the observance of the recent Hagim had passed by silently, and here he writes up Hagim in Arabic with the Hajim. No one heard any singing in the Jews' streets. So Samir is saying this in the late 60s. In two long passages in Steamer Point, the central role is played by the Jewish cafe owner, Salim, one of the former smuggler Qasim's competitors. So this is in the slightly earlier period after the Second World War. The character may well be modeled on a real Jewish cafe owner who, by the same name, who repeatedly clashed with the local Beit Din for staying open on Saturdays. So I'm going to read these two long passages, discuss them, and that'll probably eat up my time. But if I have one more passage if there's time for it, a third after this. Okay, so Qasim became cut off from the world. Despite the cafe full of customers and the strong feelings that overwhelmed him in the instant he met an old friend after many long years. Each had been convinced to the same degree and hid from the other the fact that even the Arab merchants from Hadramaut and Lahaj would disappear and their small fortunes would dissipate if they did not rise up and follow the same paths that the merchants who came from everywhere else followed. The privileges that the English gave them following the end of the war spurred everybody to take big risks. Qasim thought about the wealth he amassed and the many people like him, petty traders, who suddenly found themselves to be only spectators. He ordered dessert for his friend, sending a worker to fetch harissa with almonds. Like him, he had engaged in more than one type of business, but its end was always the same, being swallowed up by the masters of industry among the Indians, Banyan, Jews, and Europeans. Banyan is a Gujarati word for Vanyas, or merchants from Western India. Qasim had not worked in an office the way his friend did, monopolizing the transportation by means of horse-drawn carriages, nor did he work gathering hides in Mombasa as did Khaid Amran. He did not trade in rhinoceros horn, ivory, or civet musk, nor did he import Ethiopian coffee into Aden the way that Hamoud Abdu did. His friends had engaged in all of these trades in the past, but all they shared now was loss, financial loss, that is. The old merchant looked at his friend's face as he poured him his coffee. His tongue moved inside his mouth, savoring the last taste of the dessert. His hair was unkempt and its waves making their own way into his face. His gaze descended to his brown hands and forearms, flowing with sweat. Qasim saw his own image reflected in the eyes of his friend who had left Aden during the war, then returned years later, and he pondered time's assault on his own face, a face he strove not to remember since the last time he saw it in a mirror. Everything he knew had started to decay and disappear apace. He always felt himself to be on the verge of being in danger, even when he was under the protection of the English. Every time he passed through an inspection point, and the head of the guards, without speaking at the time, examined only their faces, then asked for the password that would allow them to pass into Sheikh Othman with their smuggled goods, head for the orchards, and then towards center number 6. It's explained elsewhere. Sometimes the officer would shine a bright light in his eyes, and at that exact moment he shut them in fear of the light. Qasim thought about the looks that the soldier was aiming at him, not for the sake of discovering, with the instinct of a trained soldier, the extent to which he was involved in smuggling, but to know just to what extent he was mired in filth. In such instances, he guessed many times that the officer knew what he brought for the English officer. He's alluding to this Arab prostitute. And more than once he saw him shaking his head in a not insignificant manner before allowing him to pass into the heart of the night. Qasim still remembered the names. He said that he usually asked himself what might have become of some of them. He seldom thought about the fact that this selfsame street, which had then been a narrow dirt path, could have become what it was today. At a low place in his soul, he felt that he was sad, and he thought that he could not recognize his friend in this manner unless the strange idea that they were alike came to his mind first, a resemblance that did not extend to the face. He drew himself away from the water pipe that he was not yet accustomed to smoking, and looked at Crater, that is the crater of a volcano. Crater had become an old city. It was no longer the heart of Aden. After 4 in the afternoon, he blew smoke in the direction of its heat. Then he saw Naji, the carpenter in the British Army workshop, coming in the direction of the cafe. He saw him while he sat alone at a table close to the street, and he thought that the customers would soon hurry in to place their orders with him. One of them wanted a dining table and 4 chairs. A customer insisted he fashion a wardrobe that he could put in the hall of his home. It seemed to him that the Adeni home was changing, and that some people were through with eating while sitting on the floor. A house's front hall was considered unattractive without an armoire with a glass face, with items arranged behind it for viewing. The inhabitants of the house were also specially arranged within the new orders of the neighborhood society. He went back to nibbling on some strange rounds. He liked the way they mixed flour, fat, and sugar. In his solemn loneliness among so many, he paid close attention to the gurgling of water pipes emanating from the many tables, and he discerned among those entering many types of people he had not known before the war, from Adale, Shabwa, Abiyan, Hadramaut, Mukalla, Lahaj, Taiz, Hudayda, Sana'an, Hajja. From everywhere, it did not matter to them if they entered Aden on carts carrying vegetables and fodder, pushing aside the herbage to make themselves a place to sit, nor did it bother them to wait for hours at the entrance to the city while the physician and guards ensured that they were free of diseases and finished off their disinfection by dusting them with white powder. Out of ignorance, some of them opened their mouths to receive the soft drizzle. The physician rebuked them and then allowed them in. From afar, the Jew Salim hailed him. He saw that Salim wore clean ironed clothing, blue trousers, azure shirt, and fashionable black and white boots. He walked on the road to the cafe he had opened just 3 years prior. It had been just a bar before the war, and in the years that followed, when Salim had been the boy who worked in it. At the time, he never thought it possible that Salim would one day become his competitor, or that his shop would represent a threat to his cafe. In his fashionable and air-conditioned coffee shop, Salim offered different types of coffee and hot drinks in porcelain or clay mugs. His customers, who were Indian, Somalis, Zoroastrian, and even European tourists or Englishmen living in Crater for a short period, found beer, wine, and other spirits there. Yet Qasim insisted that they not be served, or not even consumed surreptitiously, in his workman's cafe. Qasim was never invited into the battles that broke out between the waiter in Salim's cafe, who was also a Jew, and his workers, lest the purity of their relationship become muddied. The waiter described the workers as a rabble of uneducated people who had come from the mountains. The only retort the workers had was a painful blow. However, Salim had gotten used to this occurrence. This always prolonged Qasim's sadness, since he saw him at a specific time every day when he left the coffee shop, bringing things home. On his face, signs that he could not ignore. A happy husband on his way back to his wife and children after a hard day of work. Qasim sighed deeply when he observed this and choked back his emotions. So in Steamer Point, the novel, the older Muslim Qasim's resentment of the younger Jew Salim is many-faceted. He is jealous of the Jew's youth and his luck in love, but also of the British policy decisions that gave the Jew an unfair edge in their mutual business. The Jew's flouting of Muslim social norms by serving alcohol, and the sharp disparity in education between Muslim and Jew that caused quarrels among the workers in the cafe. Qasim also seems to view the Jew's precarious position as emblematic of Adenis in a larger sense, or perhaps just human beings in general. This is the second passage, much shorter, about Salim the Jew. Oh, I'm done? All right, so in the second passage, he basically says, he talks about the riots. And I'll sum it up very quickly without reading it. So he basically says that the riots were instigated by a kind of renegade faction among the British soldiers as a way of kind of tricking the Jews into leaving, but that this one guy, Salim, would not leave, and that he would stay steadfast. And interesting that he uses this word steadfast as a word that's Samid, which is used a lot in Palestinian rhetoric.
Company in Aden.
So so there's a question: does the writer actually believe that there is this in this conspiracy theory? And there are several conspiracy theories about what happened in the riots, from the British side, from the Jewish side, and also this is another one. So, but there are other parts in the book where he also has people expressing their belief in various conspiracies, like the idea that Antonin Best's house in Aden was the center of the Masonic movement worldwide, and that it had the names of Masons written into the walls. So anyhow, it's a novel that shows a lot of nuance and gray areas in the encounter between the colonizer and the colonized. And and he also and in a very real sense, he's going back to the independence struggle period and saying some uncomfortable things about some of the conspiratorial thinking and paranoia amongst the various factions in the Yemeni nationalist movement.
Thank you.
Thank you.